Hello, thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Anastasia Battle. I'll be your moderator today, as well as Dennis Small and Dennis Speed. We have a very important discussion ahead of us, especially given the incredible breaking developments which have led us, I believe, the closest we have ever been to thermonuclear war on two fronts, in both Palestine and in Ukraine. And we wanted to unite the entire peace movement around the world, above ideologies, above people's differences. There's all these various reasons why people don't like one another. But if we're actually going to accomplish true peace on the planet, we have to unite everyone under one umbrella in order to accomplish this. So we wanted to have this meeting today on the anniversary of the day of the Nagasaki atomic bombing, to remember and commemorate those who died in this crime against humanity, that this should never happen again. We have people in official layers of government, not just in the United States, but around the world, who are actually talking about using nuclear weapons. And this should never, ever be a thought to happen ever again. Human beings were obliterated and annihilated out of existence. They no longer exist. That is what a nuclear war means. This is not just a war on the ground where people die and you have casualties. This is the lack of existence of human beings, and they no longer remain on this planet. So we do not ever want to see that happen again. We thank all of you for joining us. We have nearly 300 people on the line right now. If you have any friends or organizations you'd like to invite, please bring them on now. I put the agenda in the chat so you can see the lineup for today. And I think to get us started, we'll start with Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who is the founder of the Schiller Institute and the founder of the International Peace Coalition. And it's my pleasure to have you on. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, and hello to all of you. Well, as you just said, today is the anniversary of the Nagasaki catastrophe, and it is more urgent than ever before that people indeed remind themselves, and unfortunately many people have completely gotten that out of their mind, what the use of nuclear weapon is doing. And unfortunately, we are very close of the two major crises going out of control simultaneously. Let me start with the situation around Ukraine, where on the one side, there were some hopeful signs that, maybe a dialogue solution can be found. There was the very important journey of Prime Minister Orban of Hungary. There were signs that Zelensky would be willing to talk to Russia, but that doesn't that's not the whole picture, because on Sunday, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Ryabkov, made an unusually stern warning by saying that the era of unilateral concessions from the side of Russia is over, that the situation has deteriorated in such a way that there are no more circuit breakers. And as if to prove that, 2 days later, the invasion at Kursk, at the Kursk region inside Russia, occurred with Ukrainian troops, about 1,000 elite troops, armored vehicles, tanks, and it now is very clear that this could not have been done without support from NATO, from the United States, giving them intelligence that this was obviously a weak spot in the border defense of Russia. Why is the Ukrainian elite troops, and we heard subsequently from various analysts that these troops is an elite brigade trained on NATO standard, having NATO standard equipment. while at the same time, the casualties in the other contested regions in the Donbass are horrendous. Latest figures are that, in the last 2 months, 120,000 Ukrainian troops were killed, basically because they're poorly trained. They just have a couple of days training and then they're being sent to the front. Naturally, this doesn't last long. So with a casualty rate of 60,000 a month, why is Ukraine then deploying this elite troops to the Kursk region? Now, obviously, there are all kinds of narratives now that this is just to get territorial negotiation material for future settlements. Well, I don't think that is really the official story, because we have seen step by step how the provocations are being escalated. And, now the latest, according to various American press outlets, is that, ATACMS should be used there. Now, Russia has called a federal emergency, and basically, obviously, the casualties which have been inflicted on these elite troops are significant. The latest figure was 940. Well, if there are only 1,000 troops to begin with, then the question is how many of them are left. In any case, this is an extremely dangerous escalation. And if you look now at the second crisis spot, the whole world is still waiting. Is Iran going to retaliate against the 2 assassinations? There have been several days now where, obviously, supposedly the United States is talking to everybody to prevent a wider war. For sure, there was the deployment of the former defense minister and now national security advisor, Shoigu, to Tehran, delivering a letter from Putin to the new president of Iran, urging him not to go into a massive strike and offering Putin, that he would mediate between Iran and Israel. At the same time, the head of the U.S. Southern Command, Kurilla, was in Tel Aviv. So this also demonstrates this is not just a wider regional war, which could involve all, Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Turkey, Syria, the Kurds. But given the fact that, the Russians have deployed S-400 air missile defense systems, which, according to Colonel McGregor, does very likely mean that also Russian technicians are on the ground in Tehran. That China has a vested interest not to allow any major attack on Iran. It shows you that we are sitting on a complete powder keg, which potentially could involve the big nuclear powers. And the situation in Israel obviously is hard to describe, at least for a German. And I beg your sympathy. Others may help to describe the situation. I mean, the fact that Minister Smotrich publicly said the best would be to starve the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza to death, and there was no public outcry by the international community about such a proposition, shows you what the state of affairs is. Now that brings me to the other element in the situation, and that is, that the whole diplomacy, everything has gotten completely out of control. Ryabkov, in his statement, basically referred to, an appeal that the United States should refrain from any assassination attempts against Putin or any other leaders. And there was this article in Foreign Policy magazine with the headline, "Should the United States assassinate President Putin or not?" And then followed a description of all the regime change, or a lot of regime change operations by the United States, and then going through a very detailed description about the personnel in the environment of Putin who could be involved in such an assassination. I find this the complete breach of all order of diplomatic relations among nations, which again should get people to really get upset. and not just, this goes along obviously with it's hard to say wartime or pre-wartime kind of control of the narrative. There was the raid by the FBI on the home of Scott Ritter 2-3 days ago, accusing him of having violated the Foreign Relation Registration Act, which, Scott Ritter, who is one of the most powerful critics of the present US policies, is referring to the First Amendment and his right as a journalist to do his work. Now, that is a sign of the time that there is obviously an effort to suppress any kind of discussion. What are the implications of these policies? Then similar Tulsi Gabbard, who after all was a congresswoman, a presidential candidate, and still has a US Army ID, she was surveyed by US intelligence as a terrorist threat on her flights. There are similar efforts going on in various European countries where there is a very clear effort to completely muzzle any criticism of these policies. And, that is what, we know from history what happens when there is either a war about to break out or already in motion. So I don't want to go through more elements of the strategic situation. I think what I said so far, makes it more urgent than ever that we really unify the international peace movement in ways it has not yet been done, even if the IPC has made tremendous progress in the years since we are doing this. But I think we absolutely urgently have to have a new paradigm in the thinking. What I have said from the beginning of the special military operation, we have to overcome geopolitics, because as long as we define, in the case of NATO, Russia and China as the existential threat, we are in a dynamic which sooner or later will end in a catastrophe of the annihilation of the human species. And we have to find a new paradigm where we replace geopolitical confrontation with the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, with the UN Charter, with the principle of dialogue, that we are the intelligent species who can settle any conflict through diplomacy and dialogue. And that is why I think we need to have a new international security and development architecture, which takes into account the interest of every single country on the planet. And that is why I have called for the creation of a Council of Reason, of wise people stepping forward from every country to discuss what are the policy options for mankind to get in a more human domain. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Helga larouche. So I'm pleased to have on retired Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. He's a retired United States Army colonel and the former chief of staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell. Thank you so much for joining us, Colonel Wilkerson.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, I guess that's the right word, to be here with such a distinguished forum today and on such a day as today. I think Anastasia, you and Helga have covered the granular situations we confront today quite well. I want to kind of take it up a little bit, and I want to talk about what I think is the principal existential threat in the world today. And I want to talk a little bit about, I think, how we got here and how we could get out of it. In these times of insane overseas wars, which Helga enumerated quite well, sponsored and supported to the hilt by America, of a troubled U.S. domestic scene not rivaled since 1860, of extremely poor leadership from all 3 branches of our government, I think it behooves us to stop a moment and take some stock. Indeed, it might be our very existence that is at stake, as both the 2 previous speakers have hinted at, and Helga did more than hint at. The sweep of human empires is well recorded for at least 3,000 years, and at least in sketches for about 2,000 more. In that sweep of time, minimal in a geological sense, after all, humans have been here, we think, for 300,000 years, and appreciably so for at least 50,000 years. But in that sweep of some 5,000 years, hundreds of empires, hundreds of them, large and small, have come and gone. And that's an important point. All of them are gone, vanished, disappeared, save the most recent one, the American. In historical terms, a very young one, arguably 1945 to the present day, or roughly 75 years. All previous empires, the mighty Mongol, the even mightier Mughal, the Eastern and Western Roman, the Persian, the Muslim, the British, upon which it was said the sun never set, the Soviet, and hundreds of lesser ones are gone, vanished like smoke. All had their day in the sun, as well as the darkness of their collapse in many cases. Some went out on fairly gradual glide slopes, like the British, others catastrophically, like the militarily forged empire of the Third Reich, Adolf Hitler. But all of those many previous empires, among them, none, zero, nada, had developed the technology to destroy both themselves and the rest of humanity. None of them. Yes, many had priests and prophets who conjured the wrath of their various divine providences, conjured it to predict the utter destruction of the empire in which they preached and prophesied. But like all such religious or quasi-religious prognostication, their various deities never seemed to have the power to do much more than aid their political powers to strengthen their hold on the masses, until came the American Empire. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, a phrase sometimes attributed to Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atom bomb, which of course came from Vishnu of the Bhagavad Gita. Apocryphal or not, with regard to Oppenheimer, the words sum quite well what the Manhattan Project and Oppenheimer had accomplished, and what we live with and perhaps will die with today. A single ballistic missile submarine carries sufficient weapons to destroy the world as we know it. A single submarine. If the blast and resultant radiation did not complete the job, the induced nuclear winter would. Saints forbid we even contemplate a nuclear exchange where all or nearly all of the thousands upon thousands of nuclear weapons, 10,000 in 2 countries, are employed among the now 9 nuclear weapon states, ranging from the huge stockpiles, those 2 countries, the United States and Russia, to the small but lethal one of North Korea. And what has your country, America, my country, America, done in the past 22 years to multiply tenfold the dangers of such an exchange of weapons? Not even talking about the instantaneous problems we have right now in the Middle East and in Ukraine, the heart of Europe. We, America, have almost single-handedly destroyed every one of the treaty regimes, from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty to the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty, a very important treaty, very applicable to Ukraine, to New START, that gave at least a tentative precarious balance and restraint to this horrific and now proliferated creation of the American empire, nuclear weapons. I repeat, no empire in all of human history ever developed the means to eliminate itself and the human race. None, until America. Oh, of course, others would have done so in time, no doubt, but that hardly erases the reality that we did it. In fact, we did it. Worse, there is no way even to ameliorate the clear fact that we now are responsible for eliminating all the nuclear weapons treaties. So where does that leave us? As I began my remarks, it leaves us in the most dangerous world imperial power has ever managed to create, bar none. Far worse, it leaves us there with the principal imperial power in the world, America, sponsoring horrific and pointless wars, a country bereft of leadership and lacking domestic tranquility and even basic common sense. That's where we are today. It would be the subject of an exquisite Shakespearean comedy or maybe tragedy, if not so existentially serious. Now, after hearing my dismal picture of the situation with regard to these deadly weapons, I probably should stop and offer some hope. It's difficult for me to do because I have been exposed, personally exposed, to the stupidity of Washington's leadership in a way that stays with me and will be with me until I enter the grave. The George W. Bush administration was ripe with the problems I have only just now generally and briefly described. But in the name of optimism, I'll offer some hope, I hope, myself. The answer is democracy. That weary, heavily fatigued, much embattled concept of government our founders so relished and cherished, no matter how in the beginning they might have contaminated it with slavery and landed gentry. The people of this country must object to their imminent suicide. The people must object and object and object and protest and protest and vote lousy leaders into the streets, breed and elect new leaders to take their place, and then protest some more. They must reject cultish political movements for what they are, no different in their modern ways from the dismal prophets of old, who at the day's end were doing nothing but reinforcing the imperial writ and had their billionaires too. We must find decent, caring men and women to substitute for the useful idiots, Bibi Netanyahu's phrase. The only useful idiots were sitting in front of him in the United States Congress. And they're useful to the empire's most disgusting, devious, and dangerous motives and actions. Men like Lindsey Graham and women like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And we must replace them with far better people. Mark Twain once said in a moment of humor, which he was wont to, there's really no distinctly American criminal class, save the U.S. Congress. Twain would double down, maybe triple down on that remark today. We must campaign for change and campaign constantly and directly in the ugly face of empire. And we must work diligently in every way possible on every level in the empire's home, here in the so-called land of the free, to change the trajectory of empire, even to end the empire on as gentle and little damaging a glide slope as possible, if we can. We must end these stupid, endless wars, each one of which has the potential to expand to the use of nuclear weapons. As just been said, we have military officers in our armed forces now discussing, as they did in the early 50s when they didn't know any better, they're discussing the utility of nuclear weapons. But one way to do so in spades is to agitate constantly for the reduction of the incredible 700 to 800 overseas bases of this empire, which enable and even in some ways start these wars. We sprawl all over the earth. The British never could hold a candle to us. And it's contaminating the very fabric of our nation to be out there in such a way. Another vital effort, as I have suggested, I hope by my remarks, must be to agitate strongly for new nuclear treaty regimes, and this time with all the nuclear weapon states included, meaning that world pariah state, the one engaged in genocide in Gaza today, Israel. They must be brought kicking and screaming into the new nuclear weapons regime. I hope you get the picture. We, all of us who care, and we're many, need to reclaim our republic and our democracy and end our damn empire, and swiftly, not slowly. Thank you.